MAGA Republicans and even traditional Republicans, I do not believe are fiscally conservative. I think that was always a lie. That was never the case, because you never pay attention to politics and you're thinking, oh yeah, they want more money for, the private sector, No, they want to own the private sector. They want to own the government sectors. They want to own all the sectors. That's all this is about. Clearly, in their efforts to control women's bodily autonomy and suppress voting in red states, they are not small government. I cannot for the life of me explain to y'all why I keep making videos. I don't get traction. Nobody really asks for it. I don't have a following. I don't have much of a platform. But I guess I just can't not say anything. If I'm alive in 10, 20 years, I have studied enough history to know that I do not want to be one of the ones looking back saying, we should have said something, I just don't want to be one of those people. So if it's annoying, or if you guys think I'm a social justice warrior, I think you guys just might be completely lost. And most of the people who subscribe to me are probably, leading the pack and the choir, basically. And, this message isn't really for y'all. It's more so for the people who succumb to mis and disinformation. But the first thing I want to say is, as a fellow insurance agent, if you're watching this, individual annuities, specifically variable annuities, are susceptible to money laundering from, outside entities. I would imagine people like Putin have a lot of organizations built around just, turning bad money into good money, and it's 2.5 to 5% of the GDP, the money laundering. I learned in a continuing education exam the other day. So it's a big deal. It's a lot of money. And when I see all these Republicans trying to grow the wealth gap and they're spouting Putin propaganda, it's just too much in our face for me not to say anything, especially being here in Texas, being raised in Colorado, very red Republican environments. I've been inundated by it and surrounded by it. Agents, we need to stay vigilant, at least hyper vigilant, until at least this MAGA Putin threat is down. I'm glad to keep my, firearms until after all this. We can have a debate about firearms after we put down the MAGA Putin threat. But I ain't giving up my guns until these fucking stochastic terrorists have been indicted and convicted and put behind bars. And all the people that support them, all the financial institutions, we're seeing the hammer fall. Like with Trump, he can't operate out of New York. Most banks go out of New York. So his hands will be tied financially. He's got a big ruling against him, $500 million and more coming down the pipeline. His criminal cases are coming up next. We're past the civil cases. So the indicator is that Trump is going to be convicted on these criminal counts in addition to what he's been held liable for the civil courts. But just agents, heads up, variable annuities on the individual market, with third parties that you don't know who the identity is, go ahead and let your management know about that sort of thing. We don't, as agents, we don't really know what to look for per the CE training. So it's just kind of our responsibility as kind of like the gatekeepers of this specific product. It is susceptible to money laundering. So heads up for variable annuities sold on the individual market with third parties involved, or big lump sums, especially for situations where the person wouldn't normally afford that type of product, or if they take an early loss. Go ahead and take a look at that shit, because this white collar criminal wave that we've kind of let engulf our economy is unacceptable at this point. We need to absolutely stop focusing on street crime, and we need to focus on the white collar crime that grifts Americans, hardworking Americans who make $50,000, $60,000 a year, grifts all of us collectively out of billions of dollars. That money can be used for social programs, for, food stamps, Medicaid. It could be for housing. It could be, put into education. Our public education system could be revitalized through those funds. We definitely need to take the money from the Russian oligarchs, all the assets that have been seized, and immediately deploy that to Ukraine. There should be no hesitation or question about that. My concern is that the MAGA Republicans have been taken over by, Trumpism, and Trumpism is being directed by Moscow and Putin. It's clear as day. Obviously, Putin has something on Trump, and Trump is willing to throw away everything that we cherish and love because he's a narcissist, and the only thing that matters to him is his ego, and apparently Putin has something that will destroy him unless he does his bidding. And so it's wild for me to see a unelected official give orders to elected officials. So that's why I'm on a Sunday making a post like this instead of playing Call of Duty or doing something fun. That's why, because this is the end game. This is their end game. If they win in 2024, they get an autocracy, and they get control, and they get to instill their fascist theocracy, and they get to have their secret police, and they get to control, every facet of society. And then my guess is Putin will have America primed to, topple us. It'll be easier to topple an ideologue autocrat at the helm of the United States than it would be to topple a constitutional republic with, Congress, House of Representatives, Senate, the executive branch, SCOTUS, like if you have all those checks and balances, and then the, press as a watchdog to those three branches, it's hard to topple that as a foreign adversary. So Putin is centralizing to an autocracy, so it's going to be easier to take us out 5-10 years from now, or 6 months from now, whatever the fuck he does. But whatever that timeline is, I don't care. I'm going to keep going and stay positive and try to better myself. I don't think it's given into fear. I think it's just acknowledging that there's a billionaire criminal worldwide enterprise that is hell-bent every day on taking away our rights and our democracy and our lives. And Donald Trump is as much of a sycophant and narcissist as he is. He's been marked as the one for the job. And I think he was marked long ago when he went to Moscow. I think they got a bunch of dirt on him where they knew that easily he'd be manipulated. And that's proven to be very much the case. But whatever name that a MAGA entity has, for instance, like Alliance Defending Freedom or Moms for Liberty, just know that that's a euphemism. That's not what they actually represent. Go ahead, until further notice, assume that any organization like Alliance Defending Freedom does the exact opposite of what the name ensues. Whatever the name is, it's the exact opposite. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring an army of zealots to your front door to get donations to try to, legislate against, marginalized communities like the LGBTQ community. They're overt in that. But today we're going to talk about the MAGA budget. Modern right-wing faux conservatism, also known as class warfare. Though it is subverted in many regions of the country, this class warfare is rooted in systemic racism. History shows us that Republicans, given the chance to hold power, they will absolutely create huge deficits and widen the wealth gap any chance they get. They gaslight Americans, making you think that you're not following democratic ideals, and they are, just by their messaging and their rhetoric, when in reality, Democrats are pushing for social change, and they're saying Democrats waste money. It's actually the Republicans that cause all these deficits every single time they're in power. Their one intention is to grift and manipulate if given the opportunity. And it's funny that these red states, majority of these red states, are the ones who need the most government federal support for resources. They bring in the least revenue. The red states cause the most financial strain on this country, with the exception of Texas. So all they seem to do for us is create a lot of financial strain, and then they beg for the most federal resources, gaslighting and projecting, saying that it's the other side that's wasteful. And a note here, I said they find a way in their trauma-addled brains to justify exorbitant and outrageous administrative costs to solve social programs that they want nothing to do with, and obviously are sabotaging and exploiting the very system they later cry wolf over. For instance, in Iowa, MAGA Republicans create more costs to administer benefits to the needy, like food stamps, than the actual cost of the food stamps. They actually spend more money on the administrative side than it actually costs to the total cost of the food stamps for all the folks in Iowa. That's ridiculous. That is setting up for grift. That is a MAGA blueprint, and it's all 100% grift. They do not care about the social welfare. They do not care about the lower socioeconomic classes. This is all about a grift. If they have to give out anything, they want 10 times that in return. United Way, Salvation Army, for instance, very conservative, nonprofit organizations that have been around, and they seemingly are very, good for the general population. But in further review, United Way spends tons of their money on administrative costs, leaving little for the actual people that they're there to serve. Similarly, Salvation Army, they use, poor homeless people to raise money to basically contribute to super PACs who are lobbying for anti-LGBTQ legislation. And that's the tie into the Alliance Defending Freedom. Alliance Defending Freedom is defending anything but that. It's as if they set up their government positions just to launder money through the fucking state. I swear to God, they are laundering money at certain levels, whether it be in the Trump RICO case, or his fraud cases in New York, or his campaign contributions. All these people involved should be named in that RICO Georgia case because they're part of this criminal conspiracy, this enterprise. Roger Stone should be named. Alliance Defending Freedom should be named. Heritage Foundation should be named. These corporations and these nonprofit organizations who say that they're, one thing, but they, when you go into courtrooms and find out, from primary sources what they're actually doing, they're doing the exact opposite. And you can go to these court cases and court findings, and they can't use the rhetoric that they use outside the courtroom. They can't use it inside the courtroom. And so they'll tell you the truth in these court cases, but they expect the general population just not even fucking go there. Take somebody's word for it type thing. So they're playing y'all for fool, and then they call us sheep. Meanwhile, it's just always their confession. They're projecting all their confessions on us. Every time they say anything, they're basically admitting their crimes. Every time they say anything about us, assume that it's what they're doing. But they are not financially conservative. They are quite the opposite. They leave a wake of reckless spending and bloated deficits while screaming at the top of their lungs that lower socioeconomic communities are to blame, sicking the police force on them because unlike billionaire grifters, they can't hide behind gated communities and have no resources for advocacy. So basically just pick on the people, regarding street crime, and just let this white collar crime just run rampant. And I'm partially to blame. It seems from my continuing education as an agent, sometimes, I might have missed somebody who was placing illegal funds in money laundering. And it's a perfect match for our police force because our police force seems like it breeds bullies. It's an environment to cover up and to distract from these white collar criminal enterprises. They get everybody upset about some street crime, fabricating stories of prejudice just to divide us. Meanwhile, rounding up all the lower socioeconomic folks to fill private prison industrial complexes, which they have ownership of, where the lower socioeconomic folks' labor will be exploited by our most frequented corporate brands, i.e. McDonald's. They exploit prison labor. That's one of the ways that they make enough money to stay McDonald's. They only encourage less meaningful financial regulations so they can continue to grift the public and take advantage of low information voters, confusing them with KGB mind games. They don't want a small government. They want zero accountability. They want zero accountability for a small echelon of wealthy society. What they want is an autocracy with secret police that will enforce their selfish, their bigoted, and their hateful ideologies, enriching only themselves.